Yes.
Page 721. 721. But the progress of the mind, the growth of the soul. So, I'm reading. Good morning, Sonki.
Good morning, Rangada. Sorry.
I started recording.
Yes. Thank you, Rangada.
But the progress of the mind, the growth of the soul, even of the mind and soul of the collectivity, depends on the individual, on his sufficient freedom and independence, on his sufficient power to express and bring into being what is still unexpressed in the mass, still undeveloped from the subconscious or not yet brought out from within or brought down from the superconscious. So, he has told us earlier that there is a collective consciousness of any group, particularly nations, and there is also the individual consciousness in the group. Okay, and the individual consciousness is always far superior to the collective consciousness of the group. Now, when the individual therefore has to be the pioneer, he has to be the leader, and once he discovers something, it becomes part of the group. So, the progress of the nation or the group depends very much on the individual. Now, that's a very interesting thing because I'm mentioning in one letter to his wife, Sremgo says, I know that I have the power to lift up this fallen nation. One individual is saying that for nearly 1 billion people. At that time, not 1 billion, 300 million. But he's saying that. So it always illustrates very clearly the power of the individual to bring about a change in the collectivity. Okay? And that's very interestingly he has said that there is a collective consciousness which is very, very mechanical, like an avalanche or a flood. And if the leaders know how to tap that, okay, then it makes a huge difference. One of the key moments in India was the partition of Bengal. Okay? And that was used by the leaders to bring about a complete change in the collective consciousness in India. Okay? The Vande Mataram movement became all over the world. In India, it became a very strong movement. Finally, leading to independence after nearly 50 years. But anyway, that is what he said. So, it is the individual who has to do pioneering work. Okay? So, but he must be free. He must be left free. He cannot be imposed upon, like in some totalitarian nations. He must be left free. He must not be put into a groove and limit his freedom. That's not happening in all autocratic nations. Okay, so freedom is very important. I go to the next sentence. The collectivity is a mass, a field of formation. Okay? It is not yet a formed thing. It's a field of formation. It's in the process of being formed. Okay? The individual is a diviner of truth, the form maker, the creator. You know the word diviner of truth, nothing to do with the divine. Huh? It means he is one who approximates himself to the truth. Deviner is a French word which means to guess, come close to the real thing. Okay? It's not a very clear discovery, but it's going towards discovery. Diviner, finding out the truth of the or whatever he is looking for. The collectivity is a mass, a field of formation. The individual is a diviner of truth, the form maker. The other is receiving the form, and the form maker is the individual, the creator. In the crowd, the individual loses his inner direction and becomes a cell of the mass body moved by the collective will or idea or the mass impulse. He has to stand apart, affirm his separate reality in the whole. His own mind, emerging from the common mentality, his own life, distinguishing itself in the common life uniformity. Even as his body has developed something unique and recognizable in the common physicality. That's an interesting image he is giving. What happens in the physicality, each man has very clear different features and he stands out for that. Exactly in the same way, psychologically also, the individual has to stand out and from the mass. Okay? He has, even in the end, to retire into himself in order to find himself. And it is only when he has found himself that he can become spiritually one with all. What is meant by finding oneself? To know that you are the self and the psychic being. Okay? That is to find yourself. Distinguish between the body-mind life and the real self. He has even then to retire into himself in order to find himself. And it is only when he has found himself that he can become spiritually one with all. Spiritually one with all, the cosmic consciousness. If he tries to achieve that oneness in the mind, in the vital, in the physical, and has not yet a sufficiently strong individuality, he may be overpowered by the mass consciousness and lose his soul fulfillment, his mind fulfillment, his life fulfillment, become only a cell of the mass body. Now, Self is warning very clearly that unless you are fully developed, okay, to be a leader and lead the crowd is not possible, because then you will succumb to the mass. You have to impose yourself on the mass and impose your own ideas and your own behavior on the mass. But if you are not developed, then the opposite will happen. The leader will disappear into the mass, become only a cell of the mass body. The collective being may then become strong and dominant, but it is likely to lose its plasticity, its evolutionary movement. The great evolutionary periods of humanity have taken place in communities where the individual became active, mentally, vitally, and spiritually alive. For this reason, nature invented the ego, that the individual might disengage himself from the inconscious or subconscious of the mass and become an independent living mind, life power, soul, spirit, coordinating himself with the world around him, but not drowned in it and separately inexistent and ineffective. He should stand out very clearly with his own individuality and his own nature, and he must impose that on the mass. If he does not do that, he will just melt away into the crowd. That's what happens with leaders who are very weak. Okay? They will be there for a very short time and then they disappear, nowhere to be seen. Strong leaders can continue to lead. For this reason, nature has invented the ego. So you can see now how ego also has its own function, because the ego makes you feel separate from everybody else. You become conscious of your individuality. Okay? But then it is making you separate from everybody else. But in spiritual life, you have to get rid of it afterwards, because you have to become one with everybody. But not before you are developed. To become one with everybody, when you are not developed, you will just melt away into the mass. You will not be able to stand out and pull the mass along with yourself. Okay? That's what is being pointed out. For the individual is indeed part of the cosmic being, but he is also something more. He is a soul that is descended from the transcendence. This he cannot manifest at once because he is too near to the cosmic inconscience, not near enough to the original superconscious. He has to find himself as a mental and vital ego before he can find himself as a soul or spirit. So very clear. You have to develop yourself fully with the aid of the ego, and then once you have developed yourself, you have to get rid of the ego, which is a crutch. Okay? It was a crutch and a help. And now we have to get rid of that to get back the. So everything has got a sequence and a time. The time is very important. Very an early success can. You know, Sridhar said somewhere that an early and shallow success need not be a blessing. It can be a defect. It can be something, it can be a liability, not something profitable. So when your progress is slow and delayed, then you are likely to become more mature. Then that is the real progress. So that's very interesting what Shanti said. Okay. Too early, a attempt to identify yourself with a mask can be disastrous. That's what Shanti said. Okay. So he has to first master himself. He has to become master, and then he can become a leader. So we can now read the next one. Still to find the egoistic individuality. So one of you has to read. Who will read today?
Shall I read?
Yeah, go ahead, Shiva. Read. Still to find.
Actually, I lost the page. We are in which the progress to knowledge were in that paragraph?
Yeah, page 722. 722.
Yes.
But still to find.
But still to find. Okay. I don't think I have that. No.
Still to find his egoism, individuality, page 722.
My page is different. Somebody else can read them. Because
I'm
I'm
reading Rangada.
You
no,
don't have it?
no, my page.
Okay.
No. Yes, somebody can find.
Yeah, then Archana
They
can.
can read.
Archana
I'm
can.
continuing Rangada.
Yeah.
Yes. Still to find his egoistic individuality is not to know himself. The true spiritual individual is not the mind ego, the life ego, the body ego. Predominantly, this first movement is a work of will, of power, of egoistic self-effectuation, and only secondarily of knowledge. Therefore, a time must come when man has to look below the obscure surface of his egoistic being and attempt to know himself. He must set out to find the real man. Without that, he would be stopping short at nature's primary education and never go on to her deeper and larger teaching. However great his practical knowledge and efficiency, he would be only a little higher than the animals. First, he has to turn his eyes upon his own psychology and distinguish its natural elements ego, mind, and its instruments, life, body, until he discovers that his whole existence stands in need of an explanation other than the working of the natural elements and of a goal for its activities other than, other than an egoistic self affirmation and satisfaction. He may seek it in nature and mankind, and thus start on his way to the discovery of his unity with the rest of his world. He may seek it in supernature, in God, and thus start on his way to the discovery of his unity with the divine. Practically, he attempts both paths and continually seeks to fix himself in the successive solutions that may be best in accordance with the various partial discoveries he has made on his double line of search and finding.
Okay. I'll do one thing. I'll read out the summary to you. Okay. So that we get the gist of what he said. I'm reading from the summary. It's not in the text. But once he has completed the egoistic phase of his life, he is still an incomplete individual. He has now to seek for his true individuality beyond and behind the outer surface. Beyond the outer surface is self, and behind the outer surface is a psychic being. The outer surface, nature, body, life, and matter. He turns his attention inwards. He discovers that he is more than his natural instrumentation of body, life, and mind. He seeks for his real individuality in external nature or through mankind. He may discover his identity with all in the universe, or he may look for his identity with God. He then discovers that his soul is divine. Thus, on this double line of inquiry, he makes partial discoveries and finds incomplete truths. What is this double line of inquiry? Externally and internally, in the physical world and in himself. Okay? There is a double line of entry. Science is using the external path to knowledge, and the yogi finds his internal path to knowledge. This is what Sindhu is saying. The normal man tries both. Finally, he has to get to the real truth of himself. Okay? So that's what he's saying here in the panel. Now, we'll quickly go through to see what he's saying. Still, to find his egoistic individuality is not to know himself. First of all, he has told you that he has to develop himself. Okay? He has to develop his mind, his vital, and even his bodily parts. He has to develop himself. How do you develop yourself? By feeling yourself, concentrating on yourself. And that's the ego. So you have to completely develop yourself through the ego. And when you have done that, you are mature now for the next stage. That's what Sandhya is saying. Still, to find his egoistic individuality is not to know himself. The true spiritual individual is not the mind ego, the life ego, the body ego. Predominantly, this first movement is a work of will, of power, of egoistic self-effectuation, and only secondarily of knowledge. Okay? You have to develop yourself. It is will. Okay? It's a work of will, power. Okay? So you have to make an effort. Therefore, a time must come when man has to look below the obscure surface of his egoistic being and attempt to know himself. He must set out to find the real man. The real man is the self and the psychic being. Without that, he would be stopping short at nature's primary education and never go on to her deeper and larger teachings. The primary education is development of the individual in the physical world. And the deeper and larger teachings to know himself who he is, his self, his psychic being. However great his practical knowledge and efficiency, he would be only a little higher than animals. Knowledge of the physical world is not enough to qualify you to be quite separate from the animal. You must have knowledge and you must know who you are. First, he has to turn his eyes upon his own psychology and distinguish its natural elements. He has an ego, he has a mind, and its instruments, life and body. Until he discovers that his whole existence stands in need of an explanation other than the working of the natural elements and of a goal for his activities other than an egoistic self-affirmation and satisfaction. So first he thinks he is only body, mind, life and ego. Later on he discovers that there is much more to it. He may seek it in nature and mankind and thus start on his way to the discovery of his unity with the rest of the world. Now that's interesting. Even a spiritual man, if he is looking for the reality of this world and himself in the outward, okay, he may arrive at the discovery of his unity with the rest of the world. He can get a cosmic consciousness. He may seek it in supernature, in God, and thus start on his way to the discovery of unity with the divine. Okay? That means the transcendent. So when he is concentrating on the outside world, it is the universal. And when he is concentrating on the divine alone, it's the transcendent. Practically, he attempts both paths and continually, wavering, continually seeks to fix himself in the successive solutions that may be best in accordance with the various partial discoveries he has made on a double line of search and find. the successive solutions is what is mentioned in the Taittiriya Upanishad. Okay? First you discover that you are a body. Then you discover that you are a vital. Then you discover that you are a mental. And then you discover that you are a self. So this is a process given in the Taittiriya Upanishad. So that's why he's using the word successive solutions. Okay? So you have to get that, and then finally you are ready for transferring your own ideas and development to the mass. Okay? Now we can go to the, what is the time? 21. We have got nearly 20 minutes. So we can read the next one. But through it all, now Shilpa, you have it? You have the text? No.
Yes,
Your mic is off.
yes, now it is on. Sorry,
Ah.
my video is on.
Okay, go ahead.
But through it all, what he is in this stage still insistently seeking to discover, to know, to fulfill is himself. His knowledge of nature, his knowledge of God are only helps towards self-knowledge, towards the perfection of his being, towards the attainment of the supreme object of his individual self-existence. Directed towards nature and the cosmos, it may take upon itself the figure of self knowledge, self mastery in the mental and vital sense, and mastery of the world in which we find ourselves directed towards God. It may take also this figure, but in a higher spiritual sense of world and self, or it may assume that other so familiar and decisive to the religious mind, the seeking for an individual salvation, whether in heavens beyond or by a separate emergence in a supreme self or a supreme non-self, beatitude or nirvana. So throughout, however, it is individual who is seeking individual self-knowledge and the aim of his separate existence. With all the rest, even altruism and the love and service of mankind, self effacement or self annihilation thrown in with whatever subtle disguises as helps and means towards that that one great preoccupation of his realized individuality. This may seems to be only an expanded egoism, and the separative ego would then be the truth of man's being persistent in him to the end or till at last he is liberated from it by his self-extinction in the featureless eternity of the infinite. But there is a deeper secret behind which justifies his individuality and its demand, the secret of the spiritual and eternal individual, the Purusha.
Okay. So this para is telling you what the results can be when he's looking for himself. Remember the title of the chapter, God, Man and Nature, the transcendent, the universal and the individual. So I read this sentence and you will see that different people go to different aspects of the divine. But through it all, what he is in this stage still insistently seeking to discover, to know, to fulfill is himself. Okay? He's trying to find himself. His knowledge of nature, his knowledge of God are only helps towards self-knowledge. Knowledge of nature, as you said, he has gone outward and he can identify himself with the cosmic consciousness. That's one possibility. His knowledge of God is transcendent, but he has not yet learned that God is there within himself. Okay? Are only helps towards self-knowledge, towards the perfection of his being, towards the attainment of the supreme object of the individual self-existence. When he goes to the transcendent and he goes to the universal, he has not yet understood the divine individual aspect. Okay? Directed towards nature and the cosmos, going outwards, it may take upon itself the figure of self-knowledge, self-mastery in the mental and vital sense. not in a spiritual sense. And mastery of the world in which we find ourselves. Okay? There's a colon there. You have to stop. Okay? Shilpa, you continue reading ourselves directed towards God. No, you have to be very careful with the punctuation. Okay? In which we find ourselves. Directed towards God, that is the transcendent, it may take also this figure, but in a higher spiritual sense of world and self. So, when it is directed towards the universe, you get one result. When it is directed towards the transcendent, you get another result. It may take also this figure, but in a higher spiritual sense of world and self. It may assume that other, so familiar and decisive to the religious mind, the seeking for an individual salvation, whether in heavens beyond or by separate emergence in a supreme self or a supreme non-self, beatitude or nirvana. So basically, all religions, particularly in India, they want liberation and they want to live outside the physical world in the subtle worlds forever. Okay? By separate emergence and emergence. Okay? Emergence is to come out. Emergence is to go in. Okay? So separate emergence, where your soul is merging with the divine. That's going into the divine. In a supreme self or a supreme non-self, depending on how you're looking at it. Okay? If you think of the self as a non-self, that means without features, then you're going along the Buddhistic line. Beatitude or nirvana. Beatitude, you get the ananda aspect. If you are seeing the Supreme Self as something positive. But if you are seeing the Supreme Self as something negative, then it becomes nirvana. Only peace and freedom, not beatitude. Throughout, however, it is the individual who is seeking individual self-knowledge and the aim of the separate existence. With all the rest, even altruism and the love and service of mankind, self-effacement or self-annihilation thrown in, with whatever subtle disguises, as helps and means towards that one great preoccupation of his realized individuality. So, if you find yourself, okay, you can then live permanently in the subtle worlds, or you may want to disappear. Simply using the word self-effacement or self-annihilation. Self-effacement, you are living, but your nature is, the body-mind life is effaced. Okay? You still have a self. But self-annihilation, the Buddhistic path, going in the individual soul, merges into the universal soul, and there is no more individual soul. That's self-annihilation. Okay? Don't get confused. Sometimes the word self-annihilation is used for the sense of suicide. But here is not meaning that. Okay? He is meaning very clearly the Buddhistic path, thrown in with whatever subtle disguises. So many permutations and combinations can come about as helps and means towards that one great preoccupation of his individualized reality. So what is that one great preoccupation of his realized individuality? Liberation, freedom. Okay, that's what's happening. This may seem to be only an expanded egoism. So, you are doing things only for yourself. Okay? This may seem to be only an expanded egoism. And the separative ego would then be the truth of man's being, persistent in him to the end, or till at last he is liberated from it by his self-extinction in the featureless eternity of the infinite. Now he's using different words. He has said self-annihilation, now he's using self-extinction, where in the featureless eternity of the infinite, which is the non-being, the nirvana. But there is a deeper truth behind which justifies his individuality and his demand. The secret of the spiritual and eternal individual evolution. What Sridhar is saying in this para is that once you have found your individuality, okay, you are likely to remain permanently in the subtler worlds, or you may decide to efface yourself completely like the Buddhist path and go away. But is that the only possibilities for you? Simply saying no. There is a much deeper possibility for you, which is to retain your individuality, not make it disappear, and come down to the physical world again. That's what is implying. Okay? But I'm reading the last sentence. But there is a deeper secret behind. And what is that? Keep your individuality, divinize it, and bring it down to the physical world and become an instrument of God to enable the evolution to go faster. That's what is meaning. Right? But there is a deeper secret behind which justifies the individuality. Whereas others are removing their individuality altogether. Self-effacement, self-annihilation. But okay, that's okay for the individual, that particular individual. But it's not meant for all individuals. Some individuals who have a higher aim, they can retain their individuality, not make it disappear, and come down to the physical world and do God's work. That's why it's slowly go. Okay? So we have 8 minutes. So we can do one more time. It is because the spiritual person. The ego is individuality at level 1. The self and psychic being are individuality at level 2. Okay? And the self-fulfillment of the individuality is at level 3. When level 3, you can come down into the physical world, not remain stationed in the spiritual worlds. Brahmaloka, Anandaloka, okay? These worlds are there and you live in those worlds forever. There are some beings who do that. Okay? There are, all these worlds are populated by rishis who have realized the divine, by semi-divine creatures. All these people are there. But you can do Swayambhu's yoga and come down to the physical world after realization. So you can read the next one. So who will read that? Yeah.
That
Ah.
at Brahmaloko and Anandaloko above the supermind.
I didn't follow your question, Sima.
Are these Brahmaloko and Anandaloko? Are they existing above the supermind?
No, not above the supermind. In level 2.
Level 2.
Yeah, in the subtler planes of consciousness.
Okay.
Above the supermind, yes, there are words. But nobody has gone there yet to find out. But there are words above the supermind also. In fact, Satchidananda is above the supermind.
Okay.
Supermind is a link word, remember. It's not the highest. It is that word which allows the manifestation. Above the supermind is the unmanifest. So, Sunki, can you read?
Yes, I will read.
Go ahead, read. It is because of spiritual person.
It is because of the spiritual person, the divinity in the individual, that perfection or liberation, salvation, as it is called in the West, has to be individual and not collective. For whatever perfection of the collectivity is to be sought after can come only by the perfection of the individuals who constitute it. It is because the individual is that to find himself is his great necessity. In his complete surrender and self-giving to the Supreme, it is he who finds his perfect self-finding and a perfect self-offering. In the evolution of the mental, vital, physical ego, even of the spiritual ego, it is the formless and limitless individual that has the peace and joy of its escape into its own infinity. In the experience that he is nothing and no one, or everything and everyone, or the one which is beyond all things and absolute, it is the Brahman in the individual that effectuates this stupendous merger or this marvelous joining, yoga of its eternal unit of being with its vast, all-comprehending or supreme, all-transcending unity of eternal existence. To get beyond the ego is imperative, but one cannot get beyond the self, except by finding it supremely, universally. For the self is not the ego. It is one with the all and the one, and in finding it, it is the all and the one that we discover in ourself. The contradiction, the separation disappears, but the self, the spiritual reality remains, united with the one and the all, by that delivering disappearance.
Okay, I'm reading the summary of what he's saying here in this paragraph. The true individual is a spiritual person, the divine in the individual. That is the reason why the perfection of the collective cannot come except by the perfection of all the individuals that constitute it. This is a great necessity for the individual to realize his own divinity. This he can do by surrender and self-offering to the Supreme Divine. When he does that, the ego sense of separation in the physical, vital, and mental disappears. Then there is no separate individual anymore. Man realizes he is the all or the one. It is the Brahman that causes this tremendous merger to happen. To go beyond ego is essential. But when we go to the self, there is no more separation. We become universal. We have no more station. We are no more station in time and space. This self, which is universal, one with all, is a true individual. This was Sundar saying about in this paragraph. So, we can stop here today. Okay. And tomorrow we'll take up the continuation. There are only 2 minutes left, we can't do anything in 2 minutes. Tomorrow we'll go through this para again. It is because of the spiritual person. Page 723. Okay, I make a note. In this paragraph, we'll have to identify his language and what he is saying. There are many, many interesting things that he's saying. So we'll see what he's saying. He uses different words at different times. So we have to identify the planes of consciousness that he is talking about. We do. It is because. We'll do this tomorrow. Okay. Hi everybody. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Rangada.
Kiran, Lakshana, Shilpa, Seema. Have a good day.
Good day, Rangana.
I'm cutting it.
Dada, thank
Okay.